My name is Matt Meister. I am the Chief Meteorologist at Fox 21. I consider myself a broadcast meteorologist for an occupation, if you will. I've been in my current position for about 3.5 years, but I've been in this industry for a little more than 20 years.
And how did you first become interested?
Well, a lot of meteorologists, I would say 95% of meteorologists, whether they're on TV or they do something else, have had the weather bug since they were little kids. And that was the case for me. I grew up in Arizona and there wasn't a lot of weather there, so when there was weather it was a really big deal. But I've always been fascinated by it and continue to be today, so I really live out the, if you enjoy what you do, you don't work a day in your life. That explains me and really a lot of meteorologists that I've met over the years. You can't always tell by what we do on TV, but meteorology is one of the most math-intensive sciences that there is. So to get a Bachelor of Science in meteorology, you have to get a minor in math. And that's because everything's moving in 3 dimensions, everything's changing as it moves, it induces change on other air molecules. So to be able to describe that motion and that change, you need differential equations and a lot of calculus-based math. But in a lot of physical science, meteorology is a branch of physics, specifically fluid dynamics. So it's a lot of physics, sort of the core stuff in physics before you get to the nuts and bolts meteorology. So that was kind of the educational journey. Specifically for a broadcast meteorologist, I think that there needs to be a component of having an outgoing personality. I mean, the news industry is sort of infotainment, if you will. I know PhD scientists, meteorologists who could not do what I do. I, on the other hand, would have a hard time looking at 3 data sets for a decade. So while you obviously have to have the math and science component, what I do specifically lends to maybe a little more of an outgoing performance type personality than some other aspects of meteorology where you don't necessarily need that to be successful. Well, I know you've heard this from other folks at the station that you've talked to, but this is not an industry where the bulk of people that are in it get wealthy. There are some outliers that are on national broadcasts and that sort of thing that do end up making quite a bit of money, but that is by far the exception rather than the rule. I've been in this market for 20 years. I do make a good living now, but it took a while for that to happen, and there are a lot of folks starting out in the industry that frankly make below the poverty level, and so there's an element of love or excitement or sort of an external motivation, if you will, about the industry that gets people into it initially, and so I mean I made less than a manager at McDonald's when I started in the industry, so just to give some perspective. The amount of hours that I work is a lot more than just what it takes to do the newscasts. Being the chief meteorologist, I'm responsible for the scheduling, the maintenance of our computers, what weather on our station looks like, how our weather department is branded and that sort of thing. Do a lot of outreach with clients. The salespeople bring them over and we talk about them as they're entertaining potential advertisers on the station and that sort of thing. But it varies a little bit from time of year. For me on the morning shift, the weather is more impactful to people in the winter than it tends to be during the summer. During the summer, our evening shift is working a lot more because that's when our severe thunderstorms and whatnot are happening. So there are weeks where you will work way more than 40 hours because that's what the weather requires. And then you'll get into stretches where it's sort of nice and quiet and you can kind of make up for that a little bit. But I would say as a generality, I work probably between 45 and 50 hours a week, but there are weeks where that's a lot more for sure. One of the challenges of being someone who forecasts the weather every day is that the weather is always happening. And because it's my hobby as much as a job, it's sometimes hard to turn it off. Right? So if there is severe weather happening in another part of the country, I have an interest in that, and I'm probably dialed into radar and storm chaser feeds and surface data all day long at home when I probably should be getting away from it a little bit. But one of the things that I like about my job is that the weather is different every day, and my job is different every day. And you'll probably hear that from several people that you talk to here at the TV station. It's not the same thing every day. I kind of alluded to earlier, if I was doing work on the same 3 data sets for a decade, that would be a challenge for me. I need the different weather. So I like that part of forecasting, but also being in the news environment. That's good for me. I get here several hours before the newscast starts. I have to create the forecast, which is about 40% of my job, figuring out what the weather's going to be. And then the other 60% of my job is giving the forecast out. So, we have a 4-hour morning show where I do 24 weather hits, but the website needs updated. Social media needs updated. People are emailing and calling and asking questions about, hey, I'm driving here, what's it gonna do, that sort of thing. So those are, I kind of on a daily basis break it down to figuring out the weather and then giving the weather out, kind of the 2 parts of my job. One of the challenges, I would say, is being a broadcaster, regardless of what's happening in your life, whether you didn't sleep a lot, you didn't sleep well, you don't feel good, you're having family challenges, or, all multitude of things that can bring you down, if you want, think about it that way in your life. From 5 to 9, I need to be on and be cheerful and pleasant and high energy, even if I'm not feeling that way. I have had times in my life where that has been a challenge, but that's part of the gig. I don't think you can't come fake that, but you need to be able to flip the switch and genuinely have that sort of personality or that feel when you're on TV, or it's not fun to watch. Right? I mean, if someone isn't enjoying what they're doing, people don't get excited about it, right? So thankfully for me, with the content that I have in weather, since I'm naturally interested in it, that's not hard. But there are days I don't feel like smiling, right? I don't feel like telling jokes on the lighthearted stories, but that's the gig, and you've got to do it. One of the benefits is that I love what I do. I mean, I love who I work with. I love what our show is. I like the lights. I like the energy of a newsroom. So it's not hard to come to work in that way. Sometimes it's a little hard to get out of bed, though, at 2:30 in the morning. So. Well, I would say yes and no. I actually left the previous station that I was at in Colorado Springs because I was, as the chief meteorologist, working the night shift. And as my children got older, I found that for me and the dad and husband that I wanted to be, that was becoming a challenge that was going to give me some regrets down the road. And so I made a very difficult decision to pull away from my career at that point. And I worked for a school district that was totally different work, but had a whole string of challenges, had a more traditional type schedule that was a benefit to my family. And my kids are still in the house. I have a couple years left of parenting, but being on the morning shift actually is really conducive to family life. I miss breakfast and all that, but in my house, that's everybody get up and get out the door as quick as you can anyways to get to school. But I'm home at night. I am the junior varsity baseball coach at my son's high school. I get to pick my daughter up from junior high every day. I wouldn't get to do that stuff if I was doing the night shift. And so it's a yes and no answer. My favorite aspect of my job currently is, I'll answer it this way, is the unknown. The unknown of weather, which I'm supposed to figure out, right? But sometimes, we don't bat 100% on every aspect of the forecast every day. It just doesn't, we don't have that ability as a science. And so sometimes there is the unknown of, okay, here's what I forecast. Let's see what happens. Like, that's kind of fun. But then the unknown of what's going to happen during our newscast, too. Craig, Abby, and I are very freewheeling. It's a 4-hour show. It is sort of built to create moments and, let comments about stories or whatever breathe a little bit. And so we kind of never know where the show's going to go. But we're all so in sync with each other and have such a similar mindset that it's fun to see what we end up creating. And we really genuinely have a number of laughs, both on the air and off the air through the day. And if I didn't have that with them, it wouldn't be worth getting up when I have to get up to come in here. So those two unknowns really kind of make it exciting each day. Wow. Man, if I had the answer to that question, I would not be working here and would be investing my money wisely in what the future was. Because broadcasting, specifically in the traditional, local news, over-the-air medium, has already changed a lot since I got into it. There wasn't Facebook and Twitter and even websites when I started. So how we deliver our content has changed, but it's produced challenges. So if I put my forecast on the station's Facebook page, the station generates no revenue from that. We give that free to the viewers. The way we generate money digitally is for someone coming to get the forecast on our website, where we have ads that you have to watch, or billboard ads on the different web pages. And really my job ultimately, from my manager's perspective, is to create eyeballs for ads, whether it's a commercial on TV or on the website. And so we still struggle with, and I don't think we do it well as an industry, to be honest with you, about figuring that out. I mean, we helped create these social media beasts because we have content that people want. And when Facebook was growing, I mean, they really used news platforms to kind of create what was happening on these platforms. But now we're like at the mercy of them, that people expect content from us on these different platforms. And if not, you're not supporting your brand, your news brand, but you're not generating revenue well. So how do I make a forecast post that doesn't just feel like a tease? Like, hey, come to fox21news.com because I have everything you need there, because people don't like that. Like, that feels like you're using people a little bit. Give content, but not all of it, to thus send them back to the website, really is an art. And it takes a lot of thought, time that we don't have all of the time to do that part of the job well. How people consume video content is really changing rapidly, right? I can see a day where there aren't like ABC, NBC, like those types of networks, where they don't exist anymore, because there are already things creating more content, like Netflix and all of those types of things. They're turning into content creators. They used to just be hosting platforms, but now they're making shows. And so it's like the Wild West right now. Nobody knows where it's going to go. And so you have to be willing to innovate, try things, throw stuff against the wall, see what works. Some of it will, some of it won't. You have to be okay with that, because to find out what the answer to that question is, you have to try, you have to innovate, you have to do new. And if you don't, you're being left behind. So if you're not moving forward, you are moving behind, because everybody else is figuring out how to move forward. So I don't have the answer to it. I know weather will be the last thing to go. I mean, weather still is the number one driver to any sort of newscast or news platform. But I can imagine a day in Colorado Springs and southern Colorado where there aren't 4 local TV stations because the market can't support that anymore. There will still be news gathering or information gathering entities, but we may not be doing it on TV anymore, if that makes sense. And if I project 10 or especially 20 years, I think it's realistic, because over-the-air TV may not exist anymore. So specifically for what we do in local broadcast, this is a really interesting question. And we see what happened to newspapers, or newspapers that have not made it because they didn't adapt fast enough. And local TV stations have that as a challenge and a reality if you don't create new revenue streams with new platforms. So it's going to be fascinating to watch. Hopefully you don't get caught up in it, like in the wrong way, and like have your position eliminated and that sort of things. But man, it's a unique question for sure, and I unfortunately don't have the answer, but I'm looking forward to the ride. Well, I would say meteorology is great, regardless of, only about 1% of meteorologists do what I do in a broadcast setting. So the bulk of them work for private companies. So like UPS, right? They hire meteorologists because they have billions of dollars of people and equipment and their cargo, like serving their customers on the road. Airlines, farmers. I mean, everything is impacted by the weather. Like literally everything is impacted by weather. So meteorology is a growing field in the sense of people that want weather information, but it's also a growing field in our understanding of weather and our ability to forecast and our ability to provide information. So it's a really neat time to be a meteorologist. So I would say do it. If you're a kid that is still in elementary school or secondary school, take all the math and science that you can. I recommend that to everybody anyways. I mean, there's definitely a benefit to knowing how the world around you works, right? But get as much of that as you can now, because the stronger your background can be before you go to specialized study in college, the better off you're going to be. But do it. Meteorology is going to be around. It's going to grow. There will be jobs. There will be more jobs in a decade than there are now in meteorology. So give it everything you've got.
Perfect.